Sophie, welcome to the Health Path podcast. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me on today, Alex.
No, that's okay. Thank you for coming on and thank you for being flexible. I think there's been one or two reschedules of this conversation this year. Um,
Yeah.
so we're going to be diving into mushrooms and gut health and the microbiome today. Before we do so, do you want to just do a brief sort of intro into who you are and maybe how you got into the world of mushrooms, shall we say?
Yeah. It's an interesting story actually. I'll try and give it to you in a nutshell. But I first started using medicinal mushrooms, so functional mushrooms, when I was about 30. So about 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with a form of skin cancer. And I was working with a medical herbalist at the time in North London, and he really wanted to help me prepare for surgery. And he prepared a herbal tincture for me. And he also gave me reishi capsules. So, for everyone who doesn't know, reishi or Ganoderma lucidum is a widely used medicinal mushroom that has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, and it's very calming. So what he was doing was he was trying to get my anxiety down and help sleep. So that was my first experience of taking them uh, myself. And then I was in the process of studying herbal medicine at CNM at the time. So that was 5 years. And we didn't do a lot on medicinal mushrooms as part of the course, but we were introduced to adaptogenic plants and some fungi. So again, reishi came up and a few of the other ones came up, and that really piqued my interest. Um, and then I was invited into the fold at Hiffas De Terra. So I've been consulting for them for 3 years now, as an independent medical herbalist and naturopath. And in the last 3 years, I have learned so much and had a lot of personal and client experience with their powders and concentrated extracts. And we've really delved into the research. So it's kind of been, yeah, about a decade of learning.
Amazing. So with all that in mind, I guess, how would you like to start this sort of concept? I think mushrooms to this day, they're not automatically thought about when we think of supporting the gut or the microbiome. So this could be relatively new for at least some of our listeners. So I'm going to just throw the ball into your court, I think, in
Yeah,
regard to how you want to intro it.
yeah. I think when you think of medicinal mushrooms or functional mushrooms, the first thing to realize is that they've been used for hundreds of thousands of years, and there isn't a massive distinction between culinary mushrooms and functional mushrooms. There is actually crossover. So a lot of us will be already incorporating functional mushrooms into our diet. So mushrooms like oyster mushroom are still classified as a medicinal mushroom. So is shiitake, and maitake, and indeed lion's mane. So lion's mane is the mushroom we'll probably end up talking about the most today, because it's definitely trending in the wellness arena right now. People like Jeremy Clarkson have really put it on the map by growing it in his farm. But yeah, so you might already be eating these mushrooms at home and incorporating them into your diet. So there is crossover with culinary mushrooms. But medicinal mushrooms have primary and secondary metabolites, and they have different concentrations, different amounts of these bioactive compounds that give them this therapeutic quality. And indeed, they work holistically on the body. So we'll be talking about the gut today, and the gut brain axis and the microbiome, and gut health. But I think if you're going to take away two things, then number one is all medicinal mushrooms are adaptogens. So they help the body adapt to stress and they mitigate the side effects of stress, which is incredibly useful in today's rapidly evolving world. So all medicinal mushrooms have that adaptogenic quality. And then the other thing to remember is they're all immune modulators. So they're going to modulate the immune system, which again is incredibly useful when it comes to viruses, infections, autoimmunity. So before we kind of delve into the gut side of things, just remember those two things.
Okay. And am I right in saying that's sort of one of the reasons why they're incredibly safe? They're modulatory, they're not stimulatory or sort of inhibitory. They actually have that adaptogenic property to them.
That's right. That's spot on. So, you know, as a herbalist, I work with lots of plant medicines, and a lot of herbs can be too stimulating. So they can be very useful in the short term to stimulate the immune system, but you wouldn't want to use them in the long term. Whereas medicinal mushrooms, because they modulate the immune system on a case-by-case basis in the individual, that makes them very safe. And particularly when we're talking about things like COVID, which is still doing the rounds, and you know, in an instance like that, you don't want to continue to stimulate the immune system or overstimulate the immune system or the cytokine storm. So medicinal mushrooms are a perfect solution there.
Perfect. Okay, so diving into the guts, you've already mentioned how they have an immuno sort of modulatory role, which I guess is actually sort of an indirect way that they can help from a microbiome perspective. But where would you like to start getting now a little bit more gut specific?
I think the first thing to address is we can look at how medicinal mushrooms support gut health overall, and then we can delve into the different actions they have. And I think the first thing to remember is, again, in the wellness world, there's a lot of talk about probiotics, and people are now starting to talk about prebiotics. And prebiotics are found in many different foods, and mushrooms and medicinal mushrooms are a great prebiotic. So this means they promote the beneficial bacteria in the gut. So this is a really great way of allowing our native microbiota. So again, on an individualized basis, we're working with what we've already got, and we're going to feed the good bacteria. So number one, I would say, is medicinal mushrooms are prebiotics. So there's a lot of benefit of including them in your diet, and also including mushroom powders. So they don't have to be concentrated extracts. It's actually better if you've got the micronized organic powder to get the prebiotic and the fiber that's going to feed the good bacteria. So I think that's probably the first thing to think about in how they benefit the gut.
Okay. And do we know much around sort of species that are most sort of well known to be enhanced? I
Yes.
imagine there might be a little bit of a generalized approach here as well, but I'm just wondering if, you know, we know
Yeah.
about PHGG for butyrate producers, GOS for maybe bifido.
Yeah.
Are we at that level with the mushrooms as well?
Yes, we are. So they increase the BF ratio, and also lion's mane in particular has been shown to promote beneficial amounts of Akkmermansia, and have an effect on healing the gut lining and getting the right amount of mucus for, you know, not too much, not too little. So there are certainly studies and research being done on that. And then again, oyster mushroom is particularly good for its prebiotic quality. Lion's mane is really the hero. You're going to hear me refer back to lion's mane a lot. But again, shiitake you will find in a lot of gut formulas. Yeah, oyster, shiitake, lion's mane, and then all of the others. But again, I think something very interesting that lion's mane also has is it has an antimicrobial quality, as do some of the other mushrooms. So lion's mane in particular has been shown in studies to have an effect against H. pylori. And as
Oh,
we know, H. pylori can cause quite a lot of havoc.
yeah.
So it's been shown to have this antimicrobial effect against H. pylori. And then shiitake is really the one to turn to for an antifungal quality. So you know, I get a lot of questions about, oh, are mushrooms safe to take if you've got an overgrowth of candida or, you know, any fungal overgrowth. And I
Yeah.
would always point people in the direction of shiitake because of this antifungal quality and antibacterial quality. So shiitake's even been used in the East as a toothpaste for its kind of antifungal, antibacterial qualities. And that's also why you'll find it in a lot of gut mixes. So yeah, that's definitely one to kind of have on your radar as well.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think from a health path perspective, we see a lot of people with low Akkmermansia, so that's sort of another tool in our toolkit that we can consider with lion's mane. Okay, so we have lion's mane, we have shiitake,
Yes.
and the third one you mentioned was
Oyster,
stuff.
oyster mushroom.
Okay, and they all have a prebiotic mechanism to them. It was shiitake with a sort of antifungal and antibacterial. Okay. And are we aware of any other mechanisms when we're thinking of sort of microbial things here? Is
Yeah.
there any other research out there?
So I mentioned this kind of antimicrobial effect that lion's mane has against H. pylori. So it's going to decrease harmful bacteria. And again, by feeding the good bacteria because of this prebiotic effect, you're going to naturally increase the variety of good bacteria in the gut microbiome. So this kind of dual effect of feeding and eliminating
Right.
that the two have. And then even other mushrooms like reishi and cordyceps, they have natural antiviral qualities. And you'll find that reishi in particular is extremely bitter. So that bitterness also hints that it's going to have this antimicrobial quality. So quite often in herbal medicine, it's really the bitter herbs that have this antiviral effect and this antibacterial effect. So it's also worth mentioning that reishi can be very useful in gut issues alongside the other mushrooms. And indeed, there is research showing that mushrooms in synergy support immunity better. So reishi, shiitake, and maitake, in particular, those three work very well together to support immunity. So this is why it is worth looking at mushroom synergies.
Fascinating.
Mm.
Okay. So we've got quite a lot of different sort of areas that we would consider them. And I guess just thinking how a lot of them have a prebiotic property. Do we have any research around how that then may impact on sort of the short chain fatty acids, which could then have additional sort of support for the gut?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research, and lion's mane in particular has shown there was a very interesting study in Singapore actually showing that if you just have 2 to 3 portions of culinary mushrooms a week, that will have an effect on longevity, healthy aging, and cognitive health. So, yes, it's incredibly useful to have the concentrated extracts as well, but don't discount just having the mushrooms in your diet. So that was a 2016 Singapore study. And then way more recently, as people have delved into Alzheimer's and dementia and neurocognitive health, a lot of research has come out on lion's mane, and this is where you need the powder and the extract, and it needs to be a dual extraction, so with alcohol, in order to get the required amounts of hericenones from the lion's mane to benefit cognitive health, to increase NGF, and to really see a pronounced effect from a preventative standpoint as well. So, you know, even with my clients who may have dementia or Alzheimer's in the family, I will recommend that they actually start taking lion's mane as early as aged 30. And as you said before, the safety issues around mushrooms are very good. So it is safe to take these long term. But I think something I wanted to mention earlier, again in distinction to gut and gut health, is how important it is to choose the right mushroom. Because you can actually, if you choose the wrong mushroom, feed the bad bacteria. So I'll just quickly explain that distinction, because there's a few things that the public and indeed the practitioners might not know. So what we recommend is that you avoid something called an MOG product. So that's a mushroom grown on grain. And
Okay.
the reason we say that is because this changes the polysaccharide count, so the ratio of beta and alpha glucans. And it's the beta glucans that you need in a standardized amount to bring about that immunomodulatory effect and that therapeutic effect. And if you're feeding mushrooms on grain, which so many people do, supermarket mushrooms, brands they'll grow their mushrooms on grain for speed, for cheapness. That means you won't get that level of beta glucan. So again, you could kind of think about it like with the meat industry. A grain-fed chicken
Right.
is going to change the protein. So if you have a grain-fed mushroom, then you're going to end up with a much starchier end product. And that starchiness could indeed feed things like candida or dysbiosis in the gut. So quite often, if someone says to me, "Oh, Sophie, I've been taking medicinal mushrooms, but they're actually bloating me or they're not working for me," then I say, well, try and distinguish if it was an MOG product or not, a mushroom grown on grain, because it sounds like that's what you were taking, and then you're not going to have that mushroom with that high amount of beta glucans and bioactive compounds, because medicinal mushrooms in the wild, they would usually grow on decaying wood or chestnut trees or birch trees, or in the soil. They wouldn't be on that kind of grain
Yeah.
medium. So that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. So what do Hifas use? Is it sort of wood?
They use wood chips. So in most instances, they're grown on wood chips or indeed chestnut logs in the forest. So their headquarters is in northern Spain, and they have acres of organic forestry. But there is one exception for Hifas, and that is when it comes to cordyceps. So cordyceps, the strain they use is Cordyceps sinensis, which is an amazing mushroom that grows in the wild at high altitude from Tibet. And it's now become an endangered species because people realized early on that this mushroom was incredibly oxygenating, and it was great for even things like libido. So it got really over harvested and foraged in the wild. So Hifas, to counteract this, they took the mycelium, so that's the root system of the Cordyceps sinensis, CS4 is the strain they use, and their research labs and biomedical team found a way of growing the mycelium, so the root network, in an algae bioreactor. So it's the algae that is giving the nutrition and the food in a really clean, stable environment in order to create Cordyceps
Wow.
sinensis products. So that's the one exception. It's all wood chips. And then Hifas have also sourced chaga. So chaga no one has found a way of growing chaga out of a forest or a birch tree. So again, chaga is, grown in situ.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you actually about, are any mushrooms sort of endangered? Because I only found out recently that I think rhodiola as a herb is as well.
Yes,
I had
exactly.
no
And
idea.
yeah, and there's quite a lot of herbs that cycle through this. So again, golden seal is an amazing antibacterial herb, and we have to be really precious with it and only use it when we need to. So I would say I would put chaga in that category because no one has found a way of growing chaga out of the wild. So that's why, we can use it, but I think we need to use it really sparingly, only when you really need to, because it's not something that we can overproduce. It has to be harvested very responsibly, very ethically, because the birch tree forests are only going to regenerate every 30, 40 years. And chaga is amazing. It's like a super antioxidant. Again, it's very anti-aging, and it's great to have in our medicinal mushroom toolkit. But then there are also lots of mushrooms that do very similar things. So I would say reishi is the closest to chaga in terms of antioxidant status, anti-inflammatory, pro-aging. So again, if you're trying to make up your mind between choosing two mushrooms from an ethical, sustainable, environmental point of view, choose reishi over chaga, and then only have chaga when you really need to.
Okay, that's good to know.
Mm.
Um, so one thing we haven't touched on, and it might be trickier to touch on, is I guess the world of SIBO from a mushroom
Yes.
perspective, because we've talked about H. pylori and therefore kind of the
Mm.
stomach a bit. We're
Mm.
obviously talking about the microbiome for the large intestine and the impact it can have, certainly lion's mane on the mucosa and keystone
Mm.
species like Akkmermansia. Is there any even sort of theoretical sort of mechanisms we can think of whereby mushrooms might be helpful for the small intestine?
Absolutely. And actually, Hiffas De Terra did a study last year with reishi and with lion's mane. So they did it in conjunction with a doctor and a nutritionist in Spain. So the reason they chose reishi and lion's mane was lion's mane for those antimicrobial qualities, and reishi as well has these antibacterial, antimicrobial qualities, but also for this gut um, rejuvenating effect. So lion's mane has this great effect on the gut mucosa, healing the gut lining, and also feeding the good bacteria. So they got good results using reishi and lion's mane together. But again, you have to be quite consistent. So what they found was this was in conjunction with clients in the trial doing the FODMAP diet and also staying on the protocol. So what they found was 2, 3 months on this protocol, really good. But if the clients didn't keep up the mushrooms in the diet and the good diet protocols, then they would have a relapse. So, what I would say is you have to be quite persistent and uh, consistent with this. And again, with lion's mane, it's worth having the prebiotic, so the micronized organic powder and the concentrated extract, so that you're getting the maximum amount of bioactive compounds plus the prebiotic effect. So, in my clinic, we use reishi and lion's mane side by side so often for gut health because reishi calms the nervous system. And as we know, the nervous system has a knock-on effect on the gut, and reishi is very anti-stress. It has these very calming qualities. So we use reishi and lion's mane a lot for things like IBS, not just SIBO. And for children, Hiffas De Terra have a really great product called Dr. GB, which is a syrup, which
Yeah.
is also reishi and lion's mane. So this is going to have a calming effect on the child. If anxiety is at play, if stress and emotions or sleep is affecting the gut, then it's this dual action that reishi and lion's mane have. But yeah, I agree. SIBO is a tricky one. And particularly with lots of antibiotic use and C-section and everything like that, it's something you have to be quite persistent about.
Right. Yeah, but no, that's really helpful and interesting. I guess the prebiotic elements of those mushrooms reduce any concerns around like the dietary side of things. If someone is going low FODMAP for a short period of time as a way to support their overall sort of symptomatology, then those mushrooms can actually be really helpful from that perspective as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you've jogged my memory talking about gut health as well, is like when it comes to so many of my clients, people aren't having a regular bowel movement. They're medically constipated. And again, Hifas have a product that doesn't get a lot of attention that is called biointestine. And this is just micronized organic powdered mushrooms. And, it's not even an expensive product. And this is a great solution for people who are not having one regular bowel movement a day because of that fiber content
Right.
in the micronized organic mushroom powder. So I think again, biointestine has shiitake in it. It has oyster in it. So it has all the ones we talked about for gut health, and you can get really amazing results. I had a client recently who had a really long health history of constipation and nothing was working, and she had hemorrhoids as well. And I gave her biointestine, and she just said this is the only thing that has
Wow.
worked. So,
Brilliant.
mm,
You've reminded me actually, you talked about sort of the powder and the extract. Can
mm,
you just expand on, for people that don't quite understand what you mean by that?
yes.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, when I talk about the powder, I mean you've got the mushroom and it's been dried, and then it's finely milled through a machine into powder form. And the powder that you want is an organic mushroom powder that has nothing added to it. So it's 100% pure. There's no fillers in there, there's nothing added, there's no solvent. In some mushroom powders on the marketplace, you're going to find things added to help powders mix into hot drinks easily, but you don't want that. You literally just want a finely milled organic mushroom powder, and then you've got the prebiotic, you've got the fiber. So again, depending on someone's gut sensitivity, if you have a regular bowel movement or you have a lot of fiber in your diet, you're going to want to go slightly less dose on the fiber, whereas those people that really need it, they can have more. And again, this is a powder that you could mix into soups, stews, broths. It's completely heat stable, because if you go back to how culinary and medicinal mushrooms have been used since ancient times, particularly in traditional Chinese medicine and TCM, they've been boiled up for hours in broths and stews, and it actually, helps the process.
Yeah.
So very heat stable, these powders. So don't be put off about adding them to your Sunday night stew or your hot drink. So that's what I mean by powders. And then the concentrated extracts, it depends how the extraction process has been performed. So Hiffas De Terra do something called Hifas green extraction and a jewel extraction. But basically, this means that I'll try and explain it. Let's say you have 100 kg of mushroom, then that gets dried. And then from that dried 100 kg, you are left with, I think, 10 kg once all of the water has dried off. And then that undergoes an extraction to get 1 kg of concentrated extract. So that would be a 10-to-1 concentrated extract ratio. However, when you look at the different mushroom ratios, don't think, oh, this is necessarily a stronger or higher ratio dependent on the number you see, because it all depends on what that mushroom was like at the start. So for instance, reishi, because it's such a hard mushroom, that's going to, you're going to need way more reishi than you are, say, lion's mane, which could be a 6-to-1 extraction, because lion's mane is a lot softer to start off with.
Right. Okay. So the powder, I'm right in saying that Hifas have, some resealable sachets that are essentially the powder. So that's the full mushroom that's been milled down that you can add to soups and stews and hot drinks and things. And then you've got kind of the capsules, which are the extracted metabolites or components of the mushroom that have health benefits.
Yes, so you will find in their range, so they've got quite an extensive range. You'll find the concentrated extracts in the brown glass bottles. So this is the myco range, so myco ray, myco cord, myco leo. But you will also find organic micronized powders in some of their other capsule ranges. Okay. So I mentioned biointestine. So they've literally taken micronized reishi, shiitake, oyster mushroom powder and put it in a capsule just for ease of use. So you will get a few ranges that are still the micronized organic powder. And then they recently introduced a really great range where the kind of formulating is done for you, called Hifas Functionals, and that's capsules. And in Hifas Functionals, you'll get a mix of the two. So that's where you get the prebiotic in the micronized powder alongside the extract. So for instance, they have Hifas Microbiota, which is great for the gut microbiome. So that has reishi, lion's mane, shiitake, and you're getting the lion's mane in concentrated extract form and prebiotic powder side by side together. So they've done that on purpose to stop people having to mix and play around.
Yeah, that's sensible. Excellent.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Is there anything we haven't yet touched on, Sophie, that you wanted to go through today?
I think, in relation to like safety and quality and gut health, I mentioned how important it is to avoid an MOG product, a mushroom on grain product. But again, I've been talking about organic all the way through and certified organic, because mushrooms are chelators. They're like sponges. So, if they're grown in the wrong environment, if the soil is not certified organic, then that lovely mushroom could potentially pick up a load of toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, all of those different things. So again, it's really important. It sounds very basic, but it's really important to look for certified organic on the label as well, so that you're getting a clean, pure, therapeutic product.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's been super interesting and hopefully helpful for people to understand, which mushrooms might they want to be considering within the context of their gut healing journeys. But also, I think, to remind us that we've been using these for generation upon generation upon generation, and we can get some of them from a dietary perspective. So just getting them in our food as well is going to be having a real therapeutic benefit. So yes, thank you, Sophie. It's been lovely to connect again.
Lovely to meet you again and see you.
Yeah.